Hi everybody. In this video, I want to take a look at using D5 render for landscape architecture. All right, everybody. Hope everybody's doing good today. A good few months ago, the team at D5 had reached out to me to see if I would be interested in doing some sort of instructional video on landscape architecture. Now, we weren't able to kind of go forward with it, which is a bit of a shame. It did get me kind of thinking about, can you use D5 as a landscape architect tool? And the answer is yes. Yes, you can. So let's look at how you might go about doing this. So right in front of you, you can see that we have effectively kind of a landscape plan. If you do landscape architecture, and by the way, I am not an architect or a landscape architecture person. I'm not qualified. I do, however, like planting stuff. But you're probably kind of familiar with this. This is effectively just going to be a plan of the property, a site map. Now, this site map does actually kind of feature the layout for the actual construction, which is the home. And you can see you've got the landscape sort of dotted out. If we scroll up a little bit, you can see we've got the front of the home, and we've got tracks on either side, and we've got a back wall with trees and fences on it. So this is just a landscape architecture sort of plan that I made up using Photoshop and a site plan that I had access to. If you're not familiar, landscape architecture probably has a key or a legend denoting effectively which plants they're depicting using the icons or iconography. Now, for our purposes, to keep it simple, I've just gone ahead and just typed up what is going where. Now, if this is all you're potentially presenting to somebody, that's awesome. It gives them a really good idea of sort of where things are going, where certain trees and plants and bushes are going. But we want to see, can we take it a little bit further? And can we turn it into a full 3D model walkthrough with this as our landscape architecture guide? Now, I have dragged this into SketchUp. You can literally just drag it and plop it onto the ground plane here in SketchUp. And then what I did was establish just a simple scale measure. I just drew a line that corresponded to about 70 feet. Now, I knew that 70 feet was basically the site. So really, from the back left corner to the back right was 70 feet. And I knew that the original drawing was done to scale. So once you get that one scale measure, you can kind of extrapolate the rest. And so we just have a drawing a line from 70 across here. Once we do that, we can just start drawing our floor plan on top of that. And what I did was effectively just follow the outer part of this. So you can see I've got a very basic, just framed out, or blocked out, if you will, the outline of the actual home itself. And then I use just a roof extension to add effectively a very basic roof. And I've just color-coded this white. We've also gone and drawn over the actual landscape map. So you can kind of see here, we've got areas that are going to be grass designated, and we have these circles, which are going to be where the trees will actually be planted. Areas that are going to be covered in soil or mulch are going to be designated with the brown, and you can see we've done that over here. And we've also used an additional brown to effectively designate what will be this bed that runs parallel to the entire property. All right, once you get to this point, you're in a really good spot. Let's bounce over to D5 and sort of bring this thing to life. So if you're not yet familiar with it, D5 is a real-time ray tracing engine, primarily envisioned for use in the architectural visualization field. It is, however, a very versatile and useful piece of software. You may be using maybe Lumion or Twinmotion perhaps, or Enscape, or some other similar software for your architectural rendering or landscape design needs. However, I think you'll find that looking at D5 is definitely worth your time. In terms of pricing, it's very competitive, and it has an incredible asset library of trees, plants, vegetation, and foliage. It is, as a ray tracing engine, also hyper-realistic, and the performance is quite exceptional. Now, I know that sounds like I'm being sponsored by D5. I'm really not, but yeah, it's just a great piece of software, and for roughly about $36 a month, really not bad. Okay, so here we are, and I'm not going to go through all of this. I have plenty of videos on Intro to D5s if you're interested. We're more explicitly looking at this just from showing off the landscape design. And you can see we still have our original floor plan over here. We can delete this at any point in SketchUp and then just update on D5, and that will get rid of it. But as it stands, this is our actual model. Now, the first thing you might be tempted to do is add grass, but I'll actually hold off on doing that. So what we'll do is we're going to start with adding in our big trees first. Now, again, thankfully, we probably have a list of these trees, and so it won't be too difficult to figure out what we're looking for. I'm going to hit M on the keyboard, and you can see here, this is the D5 asset library. Now, if you're just using this for landscape architecture or landscape design, that's brilliant. You have thousands of nature assets, at the moment 3,600. They are broken up into specific categories, so flowering, conifer, shrubs, vines, and herbs, things like that. Also, aquatic plants, if you want to do something with water. There's even some crops in there if you, for some reason, decide to fill your scene with corn, but there you go. As it stands, we have our key or our legend, so you can see what we have going on here. We've got things like the redbud, magnolia, viburnum, and our centerpiece is going to be this pear tree. So let's start with that. One thing to note when it comes to D5 is you have a toolbar that allows you to search for assets. You can see here I've had some recent trees that I've looked up. This is really, really handy. It is kind of like a very smart search bar as well. Now, I'm looking for a pear tree. And so you'll also notice that if we, for example, click on flowering tree, D5 rather cleverly uses the actual scientific name of the trees. Now, you might be thinking, okay, well, why don't I use just, what I locally know the tree to be? And the issue with that, of course, is localization. Instead, by using the scientific name, it's effectively accessible to everybody. I think it's a slightly unwieldy at first, but a really clever way to do this. So we're looking for a pear tree. So what we're going to do is go to Search Assets and type in PYRUS Pyrus. Now, please also note that to get the best out of this, you will want to use the Pro subscription model. There is a free version, the community version of D5 that you can absolutely try out, but the number of plant objects is going to be a little bit more limited. And so I think if you're really serious about it, try the trial, see how things look, but then you probably will end up doing the paid version. And again, for, $35, $36 a month, really not that bad compared to, for example, Lumion's $1,500 per year. Just something to keep in mind. All right, we have our Pyrus. I'm going to download this one right here. Now, please note, the asset library for D5 is held in the cloud. You're unlikely to be downloading all of these, mostly because the size is just too vast. But download speeds, for the most part, are pretty good. Now, if I move this out of the way, I'm going to drag this out and actually just place this guy into my scene. And there we go. Really quickly, I'm just going to minimize the Asset Library tab and just hit Escape to deselect. And I want to zoom in here and just show you the fidelity of these models. Now, there's probably higher quality plants and trees out there in different programs, but all in all, I think this looks absolutely kind of superb. Complexity is there, and if you do need variations, all you need to do is actually download them. It's quite a clever system. And there we go. There is our second asset downloaded. It's incredibly fast and very user-friendly. All right, let's go ahead and continue. The next tree that we need to look for is going to be a maple. So I'm going to hit M on the keyboard. I'm going to open up this. And I'm going to type in Acer, A-C-E-R, which is, again, the scientific sort of name for what we're going for is a red maple. And you can see we've got tons and tons of different options here. Now, I'm looking for a red maple, so I'm going to scroll down to these guys. The Acer Rebrum, I believe it's pronounced. I could be very wrong on that. And again, I'm going to download. Now, one other thing about this is if you really like an object, for example, a particular tree model, you can, of course, hit this little heart icon, and this means it will be sent to your favorites. Now, you can see my favorites over here on the left. I'm going to click on this. I have about over 100 that are actually listed as favorite. And you can see we've got quite a lot of plants, trees and shrubs and bushes that I've already favorited. Now, one thing to note, assets can at any point be scaled down as well. Just hitting V on the keyboard will toggle between the move and sort of rotate tool and the scale tool. And I'm just going to bring these guys down a little bit. I think they're overall probably just a little bit too high. Now that we've got those in place, I'm going to continue adding the other trees. All right. At this point, we have the remainder of our large trees positioned. So you can see out the front, we have our oak trees, and we have two sort of in close proximity, which is not really recommended, but looks cool. And we've also gone ahead and put in our Yulan or magnolias. So we've got the magnolias, the red or blazing sort of maple, and we've got our pear tree taking kind of priority. And we also have this red bud. So all in all, looking pretty nice. Now, you may be wondering, man, but this doesn't look great. Well, a couple of reasons for that. Firstly, we are working right now in the display mode of smooth. To actually see how this is going to really look, you can at any point just bounce over and turn on precise. And this will basically show you the model in really how it's going to look with lights and shadows and all the effects on. Now, for performance-wise, it's up to you. If your machine can handle working with the display set to precise, absolutely, that's sort of what I prefer to do. But if you find things are lagging, you'll notice that right now we're at 3.5 million faces, or effectively, not quite polys, but kind of approximate. And so if that gets a little higher, we can always switch to the smooth mode. Now, you'll notice running parallel along the house, we have a section of shrubs. Well, again, luckily D5 Render comes with a huge library. So I'm going to go to some of my favorites, and I'm getting a lot of these now. Will be from the shrub tab here and the flowering shrub. So you can see we've got about 300 and just under 200 of these. Again, scientifically named and beautifully modeled. Now, we're going to go for a couple of things here based on the guideline. So we're going to do some like Astrantia, some gardenias, and some consolida, which is larkspur. This is just a mixture of basically very green bushes with kind of white leaves. It's a very simple color scheme, and it will make your stuff look really, really good. So I'll find these under my favorites, and what we'll do is we'll start running them along the side of the house right here. Please be mindful, you want to make sure that when you do this, you sort of, again, do this kind of logically and trying to just kind of throw stuff up against the wall, which is the type of thing that I would do. All right, so we're going to start populating these. And again, I'm not hugely worried about the actual sort of like grass or ground texture. We'll get to that later. But I'm just going to sprinkle a mixture of these really lovely plants and bushes going down here. Out the very front, which will effectively be where the walkway or pavement is, and then the actual road, just right there on that transition, we have added in some rhododendrons. We've also added in some large thyme as well. Bouncing over here to the path that we were working on, you can see we've got all of our gardenias, and I think, some of the other plants that we were adding in. Again, just keeping this green and sort of white theme going forward. Now, I'm going to change my camera mode here just to walk, and I'm just going to move forward ever so slightly. And you can see we've also added in a few more fun ones. Now, you can also see we've added some more shrubs at the back wall as well, including some more rhododendrons, just because they kind of consume a lot of space, and some sort of golden privet, which is like, I think, like kind of like a boxwood. It's just kind of a basic bush thing. But one really cool thing I do want to show you is, again, hitting M on the keyboard, going back here and looking at the grouped vegetation tab. Now, this is really, really cool, especially for populating your scene really, really quickly. I'm going to just, again, download some of these little boxed planters. They're effectively just pre-made kits that make it super easy to decorate and populate your scenes. Now, please keep in mind, some of these group vegetation models, they're going to be very poly heavy. They may slow down the scene. If that's the case, again, just switch back your display mode. Just a simple, almost just like these amazing, like pre-made, just kits effectively for greenery. I'm going to place them where I think our actual patio would be. Now that we've assigned some materials, this is a good time to take a look at grass in D5. And that's because grass in D5 can be both an object and an actual material that effectively utilizes the grass objects in a procedural fashion. So let's take a look at this little spot on the ground. This is just at the front of our basic little home, which you can see doesn't have a front door yet because I didn't put one in there. So there you go. Now, let's just look at this little tract of land. The first thing we can do is actually look at the models. And if you see over here on the left, again, we've got lots of different options. But I'm going to search for grass, and you can see now we've got these grass materials. We can approach the placement of grass in a number of different ways. We can manually, for example, grab this grass material 01. You can see I've already downloaded it, and I can just start placing this by hand. Now, you can see that they're pretty small, and doing this by hand would be incredibly sort of wasteful and draining. So just kind of be mindful of that. You're going to use this really in very, very few circumstances, usually if you just need a very bespoke arrangement. You can also, though, if we move this guy a little bit more centrally, you can see we have the option to use this as a brush as well. So I'm going to just move this back out of the way. You can see on the bottom left of the screen, we've got some options for brush painting. And as I left click and drag over the surface, this is assigning the grass. Now, please note, this will somewhat depend on really the culling level that you've set. So you may, as you pull the camera further back, notice that these disappear. I'll slow my camera down just a little bit as well. Just start bouncing around. And I'm just going to spin my sky so you can get a clearer shot. Now, you can see we can also add multiple grasses. And so I've just left-clicked and add grass material 2, and then 6, and 03, and 09. And these are all just going to be added to my brush as I draw. There we go. It's a beautifully sort of organic and sculptural way of working with this. We can also do things like adjust the radius of the actual brush. We can very much adjust the density, but please note this will exponentially raise the poly count in your scene. So you can see I'm already gone up to I'm at about 7 million, and now 2 clicks later, I'm at 8. So just be very mindful of that. And we can also adjust the size of the grass as well. And so you get quite a lot of control over this. If you notice that when you get to the edges, it's a little hard to brush in. Maybe it doesn't work exactly the way you want it to work. So we need to do something else. So here, to assign grass to a larger area all at the same time, again, grab that radius slider, make sure the icon goes to this blue. You can hover over it, it'll basically assign it as a scatter. And I'm going to hit grass material 1. Make sure I have nothing else selected, just grass material 1. And left click, and I can scatter. Now I can still adjust the size and the density, and I can also randomize. And if I had some curves in the landscape, I can align to terrain. We can also add additional grass clusters in there as well. And there we go. You can see it's as simple as that to really just assign grass to really large areas within D5 almost immediately. Now, the only thing you have to be mindful of is, of course, the actual poly count. And this is going to get pretty high pretty quickly. In addition to assigning grass as an actual object, whether manually or using the scatter brush, you can also assign grass materials. Now, these are pretty useful. In terms of performance impact, though, I think they might be a little bit higher based on some previous testing. How do we get them? Well, pretty easily. We use the eyedropper, just hit I on the keyboard, sample this, and if I move myself out of the way, you can see over here in the material templates, we've got the default custom, the usual stuff, normal maps, roughness, blah, blah, blah. We also have the option to pull this drop down, and you can see we've got a grass material. Let's go ahead and click on that and see what happens. There we go. You can see the grass material template comes with 3 different options. It is effectively sort of procedurally generated grass. We have options for changing, for example, the base color. Very, very nice. And we can also adjust some of the other properties, including the height and the density. So again, you can kind of get the sort of look and feel that you're going for. If you want maybe a high density, but a high trim, you can actually cut the grass a little bit, and that will give you a more manicured effect. Now, what's really, really cool about this is we can also adjust things like the roughness and randomize the UVs, which will give a more natural organic appearance. Now, one little issue is that you can see the edges of the grass is still a little bit problematic. The grass material doesn't completely fill the sort of pseudo UV space. So sometimes you can just go in and manually place grass, or you can actually use the scatter brush to fill the gaps. But again, just be very cognizant of the poly count here. If you're looking to do video shots and you'd like your trees and vegetation to respond to the wind and the environment settings, please know that you can do this in D5. I hit M on the keyboard and I go back to my models. There's a nice little search drop down that I can use to go by default name first. But more importantly, just to the left of that, we can click the dynamic only button. Now, this will narrow our selection to models that will actually respond to the weather. So for example, let's click on flowering trees. And again, I've got this dynamic option turned on. So let's find one that we like the look of. Again, let's do this viburnum. And I'm just going to click on this and I'm going to place it into my scene. Okay, looks absolutely lovely. Now, in order to make sure that we're seeing this in real time, please make sure we go up to display and make sure the little figure here is set from still to dynamic. Now, I'm going to turn on my environment tab. I'm going to turn on the wind. And I'm going to actually crank the strength of this. And then I'm going to pick a wind direction. And now when I'm not clicking on this object, you can see this is now moving and responding to the wind. And it's just such a small but beautifully subtle thing that will make your videos look even better. Recently, D5 just released about 200 new dynamic trees set in and around North America. So if you're in the US or even parts of Europe, you can absolutely get access to some really, really lovely trees. I mean, to me, that is absolutely so very, very cool. Another cool feature of D5 for landscape work is the use of paths. Now, paths is basically just, if you will, a direction that you can place objects on. Let's take a quick look really quickly. So I'm going to go up to the top bar here, and you can see we've got the paths too, but over on the right, we've got actually one for vegetation. So I'm going to click path. Now you can see I'm left clicking, and I'm just going to draw a little line here. There we go. And what it's doing right now is actually assigning some objects. So in order to actually adjust this, you can see I've got my properties over here on the right, and I'm going to deselect everything. So now all we've got is this little lily model coming up, which is really, really cool. So a path is effectively, like we said, just a line. It can be straight or curved, and it allows you to place objects on it. So you can see I can also add new models. Say I want to add another plant. I'm just going to hit this tick box, and I'm going to add this guy right here. Now I've got two different plant models going on. Let's zoom in. Okay, that looks really, really nice. Now, alignment, we've got a couple of different options here, but the most important thing is to randomize this. So we can increase the number of objects. We can adjust the direction so they're not all effectively pointing the same way. And we can also randomize the direction. Now, we can adjust the random spacing and the offset so that they no longer look perfectly even or symmetrical. And lastly, we can adjust the random size as well. And the really cool thing about this is you can just keep adding models to it. So for example, if you want to just download new, basically plant or vegetation models, just download and just add them to your scene. And you can build up some really beautiful, really dense arrangements here. And I do recommend maybe downloading the assets previously, otherwise there's a little bit of time delay, a little bit of lag. All in all, this just looks absolutely stunning. The last thing I want to mention for building up your scenes and environment is the use of low poly trees and backdrops. If we hit M on the keyboard, you can see we have options for low poly trees. Now, these are really, really nice. If we download one and just put it into the scene, you can see, yes, they're technically low poly, but they're still of a pretty high fidelity. These are really great for really just adding some context to your scene. I'm going to place a couple of these, and then I'm just going to end up moving them behind the house, so it looks like there's more natural vegetation. If you need to populate something really fast, for example, if you need to use the brush tool, this is a really easy way to do it, and you're not adding as many polys because technically speaking, these are lower poly trees. They're still pretty good, and they're better than, I think, a lot than Twinmotion and some of the trees in Lumion. But for the most part, these are good, and they won't kill your scene. Now, the last thing I want to mention is also our access to not quite vegetation, but under the Landscapes tab. You can see at the moment there are 9 backdrop planes. And what these are is effectively that. It is a plane that is a flat 2D object, has no depth. You can see, whoop, yeah, look behind it, there's nothing there. But these are really great for hiding the horizon, which is something, if you really want to take your sort of renderings or your landscape architecture renderings to the next level, making it not look like it is basically a 3D shot will be really beneficial. And so these are very cost effective, and they do come with some options, not many. You can use the eyedropper on them to adjust, for example, the base color and make some changes. But really, these are fillers to really hide that horizon line. Okay, with that being said, the last thing we need to do is really just go back in here and add some life and some set decoration. And for that, we're just going to use models. Now, a lot of the models are going to come from a number of different tabs, including furniture. There's some wonderful exterior furniture, and there's really a lot to explore here. A lot of the things that will give your shot a little bit more life and make them look hopefully a little bit better are the small touches, and D5 does those really, really well. Okay, if you've made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.